Hey, it's Drybear, and today we're going to go through all of the monsters in Content Warning, what to look for, and how to counter them. Now, I've put them in order of, in my opinion, the least dangerous to the most dangerous, and this is after you know how to deal with them. Some of these may change in your list if you are unaware of how to deal with them or you've never encountered them before, but some of the monsters that may seem more dangerous are actually pretty easy once you understand what they're all about. Additionally, these monsters aren't referred to directly inside the game itself, so I'm going to go by their actual game files, like what they're referred to in the game files themselves, and possibly what people have started calling them inside of it, or if I have a nickname for them specifically. Starting with the lowest threat level in Content Warning is going to be the mouth, and this guy is pretty cute. He's pretty harmless as well. He can do damage in rare cases, but for the most part, he will only approach you when you aren't looking at him because he's kind of shy, but if you turn around and look at him, he'll get scared and run away. If he ever gets close enough to you, he will scream and make lots of noise, which can be kind of startling in the dark, but that's the majority of it. You'll just want to get a small amount of footage of a mouth if you see one, just to get some extra points for the viral video, and you're good to go. However, I will note that I have taken damage from a mouth once before when I got him cornered in a corner and he was screaming. So there are cases where if you corner him or he doesn't have a way out and he's screaming, he will do a small amount of damage to you, but for the most part, he poses no threat to you or your teammates. Next up is the Snail, or the zombie as it's referred to in the game files. This enemy is relatively passive and mostly slow. He will look at you for a few seconds when you first encounter him, and then will just start walking towards you kind of menacingly. He's very easy to kite and get away from unless you're in a tight space, so just kind of give him a wide berth and stay away from him, and you'll be fine. Gather some footage to get some extra points. However, he can pose a threat because if he ever does get close to you, he will grab you and start doing minor ticking damage to you until you get free. The best way to escape his grasp is to hold sprint and jump repeatedly to escape. I've tested this by both letting him drag me with normal walking and sprinting and jumping gets you out a little bit faster than if you were to just kind of passively try to walk away. But these guys have killed me many times before, especially in the door maze on the second map where it's very, very thin corridors where you can't really get away from him without being grabbed at least once. And additionally, they can actually spawn in large groups as well. I've encountered hordes of snails of upwards of 6 to 7 at once, which can be a bit of a problem. Next is the Jello, which by itself doesn't do any damage to you. It's basically a water bear slash flea looking monster that's made entirely of Jello that will run towards you, grab you, pick you up, and carry you away from your friends. And while the Jello doesn't do any damage to you at all while you're riding along, he could take you somewhere extremely dangerous or run you into another enemy that will be your doom. And I put him higher than the Snail because there's not really any easy ways to avoid being grabbed. Your best bet is to use elevation by jumping up onto a cabinet or a shelf and trying to avoid him that way, but if you ever touch the ground and are near him, he will instantly grab you and fly away. All you have to do is wait for him to let go, which takes like 8 seconds or so. He'll let you go and then zoom away and then come back for another drive-by if you're still in the area. Next up is the Slurper, and it's this starfish that sits on the ceiling, kind of like those tongue lickers from Half-Life. They are hard to spot, and you will see a drip of saliva drooping down underneath them, and if you walk up to them and touch this saliva, you will instantly be grabbed and pulled to the ceiling. You'll start taking ticking damage until you die. Now, it is possible to dislodge yourself by hitting the tongue of the Slurper, but it's also insanely difficult. I've only managed to do it once or twice with trying many, many times, and that's just because your camera gets forced downward while you're trying to aim towards the tongue, which you can't really angle towards very easily. Your best bet to get dislodged is to have someone else nearby throw at a full charge an item at the base of the tongue of the Slurper. At the very end of the tongue is this knot-like structure, and that's the base of the tongue. If that ever gets hit by a fully charged item thrown at it, it will let go of whoever it's holding on to. If you didn't know, you can drop your items by pressing Q on PC, but you can also hold Q and you'll see the items shaking and rumbling and your camera shaking. If you let go when it's fully charged, it will launch further away, and this is how you dislodge someone from a Slurper. Just be mindful that once they drop, they will immediately reset position and can grab you right away, so you want to get away from them quickly. Next is the toolkit Whisk, as it's referred in the game files, or just Whisk if you want to shorten it. This is a charger enemy that's pretty easy to avoid if you know that he's there. He will lock onto you and start spinning the whisks in his head, and after a second or two, he will charge in a straight line towards the person he's locked onto and then stop or fall over or run into into something, which with some practice can be very easily avoided or dodged as long as you wait for the whisks to start spinning and you can sidestep the dash. However, it doesn't always work out that way, mainly because on some of the dashes, occasionally he will be able to curve pretty substantially. So he'll go into like this circular spin move, NASCAR screeching, where he'll drift around corners or try to run into you. And if he ever does collide, he does a ridiculous amount of damage. I've had one of these whisks run down a hallway and wipe out an entire party in one go by just hitting us all directly in the face. But if he's doing a normal straight charge, you can lead him off of ledges, into corners, into rooms, or even into machines, or even off ledges on the maps that have permanent cliffs that they can fall off of and get rid of them permanently. Next is the ear, which is this blob thing with legs that it's covered in ears and has an ear for a head, and as you would expect, he is very sensitive to sound. If you're careful and don't talk, you can actually just crouch around these guys and they won't attack you. But if anyone makes a noise, he will then start lunging at people, dealing a moderate amount of damage. However, because he's so sensitive to sound, if you ever make a lot of sound, it will disrupt him. He'll cover his ears and start running away, so all of you can just start yelling into your microphones and cause him to flee the scene. Next is Eye Guy, and just like the ear guy or the ear, he is a very large creature with gigantic eyes, so he's very sensitive to light. However, he's kind of the opposite in that if you don't ever shine light on him, he is perfectly harmless. You can jump on him, you can smack his butt, you can do whatever you want, and he won't retaliate as long as you're not shining any light into his eyes. There is a distance from which he will react, so you can film him from a distance with the zoom feature and get plenty of footage of him as long as you're far enough away, but if you ever get within his minimum range and shine either a flashlight or your camera while recording on him, he will dilate his pupils all the way to a small size and then start charging at someone, doing tons of damage. It takes about 3 or 4 hits to kill you, but he does knock you down or knock you back every time he hits and moves relatively quickly, though you can't outrun him while you're at full sprint. So if you ever run out of stamina, he'll catch you, but if you're at full sprint, you should be able to outrun him. And after a little bit, he will reset and start walking away, so you can very easily just use this as a chance to turn off all your lights and walk around him. Next is the spider, and I seriously considered putting this spider way higher on the list because it's actually the enemy that caused me to lose my best run. He looks more like an ant than a spider or anything else, but he does look like this and will come towards you. He'll start charging you and pushing you and will start doing pretty moderate damage. Just like the Eye Guy, it'll take about 3 or 4 hits before you go down, and he's pretty dangerous with that amount, but the big challenge with the spider is the webs that he puts down constantly, and currently these don't time out, they will linger, and I've had situations where he webs up staircases or ramps full of webs, and then you get attacked by a larger monster that's more dangerous and you can't escape. There's nowhere to run, there's nowhere to go, and you're just trapped there because of the webs that are there. You can escape the webs, and if multiple webs land on you, you won't be able to move very much, but if you hold sprint and jump, just like with the snail, you'll eventually break free of the webs, or if you can find a ledge to fall down or to get some distance that way, it can be super helpful. When you encounter spiders, I recommend having one player just drag the spiders away from corridors or junction points, so you don't get into the situation that I've been in where it just blocks up a pathway that you can't get through at all, or just use a goo ball to stick them in place and keep them from chasing. Weeping is one that's really hard to deal with if you are playing solo, and I've played a lot of solo in this game, and this one just chases after you if you aren't looking at it. As long as one player is looking at the weeping, they won't move at all, and this counts through walls, by the way. There's no line of sight checks for this. It's just, I've tested this, you can look at them and then go behind a wall, and if you're not looking at them globally throughout the map, if they're in range, they will move towards you as long as they can see your back. If they can get close enough to someone from behind, they will capture them, lock them inside of their trap, and start a timer. The person inside can do nothing to escape, they just have to wait for their fate. When the timer runs out, they will be instantly killed on the spot, but other players can come up to the weeping and complete the captcha with 3 possible attempts, and if they succeed it, the person inside will be released, and the weeping will go on a cooldown timer. Well, they'll put up their red hand in the air, and they won't do anything for another minute or 2. And honestly, as long as you're in a party that knows about this monster, these are actually a huge boon because they're worth a ton of points if you film the process of someone being captured and then being released. So if you get that on your footage, it's really valuable for your overall score, and then you can just disable them and walk away. The bomber is this leaping leapfrog looking character that has bombs all over his body. He will periodically throw these bombs towards you, and after a few seconds they will explode, doing ridiculous damage. If you're dead center on the explosion, it can one-shot you, and and if you're close to the center, it can do about 90% of your health. So very risky, very dangerous. You want to perk up whenever you see a bomber on screen. However, if you are in melee range of the bomber, he will just leap at you and explode automatically, triggering all the bombs on his body, killing both of you instantly. So you want to keep your distance and then let him blow himself up with his own bombs. Because yes, he is vulnerable to his own bombs, and if you're quick enough, you can pick up the bombs and throw them back at him, or not many people know this, but you can pick up the bomb and then switch to another item and it puts it in your pocket, which diffuses the fuse on it and you can hold it onto it for later. Just note that if you bring it back out, it will be continuing the timer, so you want to throw it right away if you do switch back to it. The big thing here is just to make sure that you take one of his bombs and blow him up, or run away until he walks over his own bomb and blows up, and then he'll be out of your hair. Next is Knifo in the game files. It's this hooded Tonberry looking creature that they talk about as being in like a ghost sheet walking around. They will giggle and laugh a bunch, and they can show up in groups, which can be quite dangerous, but you can escape them if you're at a full sprint. So they go about a little bit less than your full sprint speed, so if you run out of stamina, they'll catch up to you, and they do have lunges and jumps if you get within range, dealing damage with their knife or swiping at you if they get really close. They do decent damage and are a big threat if they're up close, so you want to kind of deal with them. However, they do have a pretty small amount of stamina, which means that after a little bit of chasing, they will get tired and stop and then stare at you because they're out of stamina, and then they'll start chasing again. So you just want to run them around until they get tired and then get away from them. Try to break line of sight if you can and keep your distance, though you can easily shock stick these guys and then leave them behind as you move on to other things. Snatcho is this long, spindly armed creature that lives in the dark and will steal items from you. Keep in mind that he can actually scale walls as well, so you want to look up towards the walls, but he'll run towards you really quickly, and if you don't shine any lights on him, he will grab you, cause you to drop the item you're holding, and start carrying you away. However, he is weak to light, so if you use a camera that's currently recording, which turns the light on, or you use a flashlight on him, he'll disappear and respawn somewhere else nearby. However, it poses a big problem if you're solo or by yourself in an area, because he will cause you to drop your flashlight when he grabs you, which means you can't counter him, and he'll drag you away and damage you until you die. Next is the turret, or the dog, because it has 4 legs. It looks like a Boston Dynamics robot dog that put a turret on it and has a smiley face in the front as well. As long as you know that the turret is there, you can deal with it pretty easily. The turret itself is motion activated, so if you stand still and don't do anything, most of the time you can avoid getting shot at. However, if you get into a position where you have to move, you can get very easily mowed down by this turret. And also keep in mind that because it's a ranged enemy, the turret can fire into the diving bell and kill you and your whole party at the end of a run. Luckily, the turret doesn't move very fast. You can easily sprint away from it and get cover. So as long as you see this red light ahead of time, you just want to make sure you use line of sight breaks, use walls and cover, and move from cover to avoid getting shot at, and wait for the turret to walk away, and you'll be good to go. Just like the Knifo, they are susceptible to the shock stick and will cause them to fall down. However, this won't turn off their turret, so just be wary that if you shock stick them, they are still going to be firing in random directions, so you want to pay attention to how they're falling so you can avoid getting hit. The Barnacle Ball is some kind of Lovecraftian nightmare ball that moves around on these 4 tentacles and is exceptionally dangerous. It's also really loud, so you'll know when a Barnacle Ball is nearby, though they are pretty rare, so it's very uncommon for people to find these in their first hour or two. If the Barnacle Ball aggroes you, you're in very serious trouble because it will run towards you and do a few different things. Firstly, it can cause a gas cloud that does ticking damage to you, but the most dangerous of these is if it floats up into the air and starts doing its vortex tornado attack, which will pull you in towards it and deal damage. However, just like the spider web and the snail, you'll want to sprint and jump to try and stay away from the center of the vortex, as most of the time this will kill you if you reach the center. I've honestly never gotten close enough to a Barnacle Ball to try the shock stick, so if anyone has able to shock stick this enemy, let me know down in the comments. Next is the Larva, and I only put it higher than the Barnacle Ball because the Larva is far more common. The Larva is this hydralisk looking bug monster that will charge at the nearest enemy and grab them. In my experience, these guys do not give up the chase very easily, and once they grab someone, they will lift them up into the air and throw them at either a wall or another teammate nearby. And this causes all kinds of problems because if it kills you or throws you far away and you have the camera, it'll be very hard to recover that camera because it's hard to know where exactly it went or if it went under the ground. But also the larva will throw the person that it picks up at your teammates, which will deal damage and will sometimes kill both of you in the process. The only saving grace for the larva is they are susceptible to shock sticks, so you want to have one on hand, shock it, and try to get as far away as possible. But if you don't have one on hand, you'll just want to jump up on shelving units or on stairs and try to get over the larva and just try to get away as fast as you can, as these guys are incredibly dangerous. Next up is the flicker, and this enemy is a huge pain because if you don't play the little dance that he wants you to play perfectly, you will die every single time. Luckily, he's one of the rarest enemies in the entire game, so you won't run into him all that much, but you want to pay attention for the warning signs. If any light bulbs in the area start flickering, almost like a ghost, a paranormal activity, you'll know that the flicker is nearby. Normally, if he's not engaged, he's completely invisible, you can't see him at all. Your warning sign is going to be flickering lights when he's passing by them. You'll hear a passive hissing or bubbling sound if you're really close to him and he hasn't been aggroed yet, but just pay attention to the lights and this low rumble that he has. If he appears or you see red light, you want to immediately look at your toes. Look straight at the ground. It is the safest place to look because he could be above you or to the side, because if he spawns and you look him directly in the eye, you are as good as dead. He will grab you, lock your camera, and start sucking you in until you perish. However, if you make very sure that you don't look him directly in the eye when he appears physically, you will be just fine. And my best choice for this is just to look straight at the ground, look at your feet, and you can move around. As long as you don't look at him, you won't be killed, and you'll just have to kind of include him as part of your process, or maybe just abandon the run because he's just going to be floating around for a while. You can use the defibrillator to res anyone that did look at him, and he can grab large groups of people as well. Anyone that's looking at him when he opens his eye will die. It doesn't matter if it's one person or 4 people, you're all going to go down. So watch the flickering lights. If you see red or you see a tentacle monster appear, just look at your feet and just start using your ears and your spatial awareness to move around until he disappears, and then just be wary that he's going to be looming around for the rest of the game. Next in the game files is the Big Slap, but I just call him the Slapper, though I've heard him in some games called the Juggernaut or the Giant. And this is, in my opinion, the most dangerous enemy currently in the game of content warning. When you get near him, you'll hear this gurgling sound to know that he's nearby. And the best advice I have for the Big Slap or Slapper is just to just avoid him at all costs. He will very easily kill you and everyone in your group with extreme prejudice. As far as I can tell, he's immune to most, if not all, CC in the game. I've never been able to shock stick him or slow him down. And when aggroed, he will lunge towards the nearest person and immediately give them a huge smack across the face, which does insane amounts of damage and will very easily wipe you out. And then he'll just keep lunging over and over and over until everyone is dead. However, you need to learn to listen for the gurgling sound to know that he's nearby so that you can just avoid him or film him from a distance. You can use elevation to jump over him, especially on the staircase levels that have these big winding staircases, to try and get distance from him. And if you get enough distance and line of sight breaks, he will stop chasing. So you just have to be creative and use your terrain and area to try and keep him away, or just split up and sacrifice somebody. Because he's a lunge enemy, you can sometimes have him lunge off of a cliff or a ledge if you're really careful, but just be in mind that whoever's serving as bait in this case will likely go down with him. And that's all the monsters that exist in the game right now. In the files, there are other monsters that have yet to be released or just may not have been put out yet, but these are the ones that you will encounter while playing content warning as of the making of this video, and I hope it was helpful to help you and your friends explore the old world. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.